Next up is Scott Reinert. He is the Water Resources Manager with El Paso Water Systems. I'm not going to go through your resume. It's quite long, but funny story. My fourth grader wanted to know what we were going to talk about, and I showed him a little bit about what you do, and he said, well, that's poo water.
Yeah.
So if y'all don't know what poo water is.
All right. Well, I know yeah. Well, we call it toilet to tap, but I've been reformed and it's purified or pure. So we'll talk about that. That's a very good way to start off. Wait. Okay. There. I figured out the remote. Okay, so welcome. I see a few friendly faces out there and one not so friendly guy. I have to make sure I say managed aquifer recharge, okay? Or he'll get on my case. So welcome. I'm going to talk about beneficial reuse for El Paso water. And if you remember anything that you can tell your son later is that effluent is valuable in the desert and becoming more and more valuable. And so in El Paso's story, we've been using this reuse for over 70 years. And that's kind of our journey of acceptance towards using more and more reuse. And in fact, when we're using the reclaimed water, you know what that means? We're not having to pump as much fresh groundwater for these other needs. So that in itself is kind of the segue to getting started. Reuse is the forefront of aquifer recharge, irrigation, and then ultimately culminating in what you said is poo water. But I won't say that anymore. So this slide here shows El Paso's water supply. We have the Rio Grande, which has been very fickle the last 20 years. This year, we are not having our drought of record, but we're going to come close to it. Our drought of record was 2013 when we got 10,000 acre feet of water for us. A full delivery for El Paso would be 60,000 acre feet. So this year, we're going to about 15,000. When we don't have full river supply, we have to pump more and more of our groundwater resources. It puts strain on our aquifer resources, and that's why having any kind of aquifer recharge, managed aquifer recharge, is beneficial to the long-term health of our aquifer. And on this pie diagram, Rio Grande supply can vary anywhere from 50% to 10% of our annual supply. The Waco Bolson, that's the aquifer on the east side of the mountain, that's what's going to take up the load. When the river's not supplying, we pump the Waco more, and year in and year out, the Mesilla Bolson is pumping the same amount. This is a diagram that shows the infrastructure in El Paso. We are groundwater dependent so much. Those yellow dots are the Canutillo wells that supply all of the west side of El Paso year-round. They're getting groundwater from these wells. Interestingly enough, for the hydrogeologists there, we have wells that are next to each other that are completed at different horizons. So you have a shallow well, and right next to it, 50 feet away, you'll have an intermediate depth well, which is 600 to 900 feet, and then you can even have a deep well from 900 to 1,200 feet, and they don't interfere with each other. That's a completely different concept than what we have on the Waco Bolson, where you have to have 2,000 and 3,000 foot of spacing, or you'll have interference. So then if we go over to the east side of the mountain, we have the Waco Bolson. That's all those red dots. The Waco Bolson management challenges that we have faced over the years are water level decline, which we're addressing with this aquifer recharge program that we have, and then also water quality changes, salinity. And we have a desalination plant. That's that orange dot on the east side of town, located where all the brackish water is. So we're using technology to capture and utilize brackish groundwater. Then those two white dots are the river plants that we use to capture river water. River hasn't been our friend as much lately, but we want to be friends. We want to use the river, but when it's not there, we pump more and more groundwater, and that includes our desalination plant. So now as I start to talk about water reuse, you can see the development. If you look at the Looks like a caveman there. But on the left, the effluent is purely disposal. It's like get it out of the way, get rid of it, do whatever you have to do for your permit, but just, it's not a resource, it's a trash. Get rid of it. That was the concept for many, many years. And then, probably back in the 1950s, 1960s, somebody had the great idea that we can discharge this effluent into the river, and the farmers are using it. Well, why don't we use this water, same water, for our parks and golf courses? So that's building the concept of reclaimed water, ultimately leading to more and more public acceptance. So I would tell anybody that's kind of starting their journey of reclaimed water, start off with turf irrigation. That builds the acceptance, and it's good use of the water resources. Then in 1980s, we started with aquifer recharge. This is I'll talk more about it, but we have a wastewater plant that was located 20 miles away from a river, and the state said, well, you're going to have to clean your effluent to drinking water quality. Once we did that, then we could recharge the aquifer, and also we sell that water to the electric power plant. So we're beneficially using the effluent that is there. And again, if you treat this effluent to drinking water quality, it really increases the value of it. And then, finally, look at this caveman. He's standing upright, probably has a nice suit on, and he's representing advanced water purification. That's what we say instead of poo water. And actually, we've developed that it's actually called Pure. It's called the Pure Water Center. We had our groundbreaking in the end of February. It is a 10 MGD plant. We're going to treat the wastewater. I'll talk a little bit more about that. We're going to treat it, and then after we treat it, it's going to be an aggressive permeate, if you will, and we're going to blend it back with an abundance of naturally occurring brackish groundwater that is free for our taking. And it actually neutralizes this aggressive permeate, so our finished water meets the piping conditions of the rest of our system and water in our system. So here's a little bit of the chronology of our water reuse efforts. The Scaredy Golf Course, 1960s. This was, again, hey, this river water, we're putting effluent into the river, let's use it for irrigation. And then 50 miles of purple pipe in the city of El Paso. We were greatly funded by the Bureau of Reclamation. This is expanding our water supply, purple pipe, and this expanded our network of purple pipe deliveries. We've reached a point where we're not expanding the purple pipe network anymore. 50 miles of pipe, 10 pump stations. It's benefiting us, benefiting our customers, but the cost-benefit ratio of expanding pipelines out further to limited customer deliveries is not worth it. So furthermore, we're going to invest in the Pure Water Center going forward. So I'll talk a little bit now about aquifer recharge. I did like hearing your statistics of the 10 inches of rainfall a year. It's not very much, but we try to maximize that with our water that we get from our aquifer recharge program. Since 1985, we've recharged up to 80,000 acre-feet a year, and this comes from the Fred Hervey plant. It's a wastewater plant. Okay, so this project has benefited water levels in the area, and it's actually better quality water that we're recharging with than what was in the aquifer. Here's a location map of where our aquifer recharge program is. It's in northeast El Paso. It's in the Waco Bolson. And when you talk about aquifer recharge, you have to consider several factors. You have to have a source of water that's available for repurposing, if you will. Okay, you have to start with that. Then you need to have good geologic conditions, depending on what your method of injection or recharge is. I was talking to a couple of, I think it was James Beach today. Injection wells don't work for every application, and basins don't work for every application. So Mike's nodding his head. So you need to study and understand your geologic conditions. In fact, we have very favorable conditions where we're doing it for basins. We strip off the superficial caliche. The superficial caliche is like a concrete. And if you ever try to pour water in your driveway and hope it goes down 400 feet to the water table, it's never going to happen. But if you strip off that concrete on your driveway and you have porous sands, that water is going to move rapidly down to your water table. So that's kind of what we have here. So the Fred Hervey plant, located 20 miles from a river, is out kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's near Fort Bliss, and you might have heard me tell this story. Initially, they were lagoons. These lagoons were overflowing onto Fort Bliss, and Fort Bliss told us to get our shit out of there. So we did have to build a wastewater plant. The initial thinking was all wastewater plants put their effluent into a river. Well, in this case, the nearest river is 20 miles. That doesn't make any sense, building a pipeline through the interstate and everything else. So that's why the idea went to treating this wastewater to drinking water qualities. And guess back then, that's 40 years ago, and think now in this day and age how innovative that is. Treating wastewater to meet drinking water quality. We were doing that 40 years ago. That's what made it acceptable by the TCEQ to put it into the ground. So anyway, if you can treat your effluent to meet drinking water quality, it becomes more and more valuable. So I said that factoid, 80,000 acre feet, and it's the only ASR program using reclaimed water in Texas. Now, I heard something today about the right, Neil? Right, so I think that's, I've had a lot of people asking about what we do here, and the minute I say it's reclaimed water, they stop talking to me, because they want to hear about our recharge project, and I say, well, it's with wastewater effluent to drinking water quality. And they go, oh no, that's not what we're doing. But I think this legislation is going to open a lot of doors, because I think there's effluent everywhere, right? So let's beneficially use the effluent. So here's a little bit about the Fred Hervey plant. Again, it is I like to call it a water factory. It's a wastewater. It's actually two plants. It's a wastewater plant, and at the end of the wastewater plant, then it becomes a water plant. So they're actually two plants together, and that's why we call it a water reclamation plant. And its latest capacity is 12 MGD. So this is a picture of all the processes. I'm not a process engineer, but it's always fascinating to go there and see all the technologies. And again, when you go to these water conferences, you hear about One Water. Well, this is a good example of it. You have wastewater, and at the end of this process, it becomes drinking water. And you can see at the very top right portion, that's the ASR arrow. And that's where it's going off into the ASR world. This is a diagram, if you like this kind of thing. The left half is the wastewater treatment portion. So we have, raw wastewater going into the plant. You let it settle out, and then you're cleaning it. Then you're doing all the chlorination, and then ultimately send it out for aquifer recharge. Aquifer recharge is about 3,000 to 4,000 acre feet a year. The biggest user of this effluent is the El Paso Electric Newman Power Plant. It actually uses more, about 4,000 to 5,000 acre feet a year. Again, when they're using that effluent, we're not pumping groundwater. So it's a good use of that water. And then there's also a big golf course out there. And when they're using this reclaimed water, they're not pumping the aquifer. So there are great uses for effluent when you treat it and put it in the use, because you're not pumping groundwater. Okay, there's the Fred Hervey expansion. Okay, so here's a little bit more. You can see the plant there. That orange line there is where the wastewater, the effluent is being directed to. And right in the middle of that, you can see where the golf course is. And that is a big user of the water. And then as you go up, it takes the north, goes up north, and there's the that big rectangular square. That's the El Paso Electric Newman Power Plant. And they're a big user of our water. They use it for cooling. And so these dots here that I just show on here, these are all the production wells. So this is where I get to talk about managed aquifer recharge again. We are actually, with our recharge facilities, recharging the aquifer, and then our different production wells are actually pulling out the water. we're not using the same well to introduce the water and then pull it out. So that is a key distinction in what true ASR is versus managed aquifer recharge. And David Smith taught me this, right? I didn't see the need to go in all these letters, but I did tell him just a minute ago that with my finance people or money people, it's always ASR for them, but it technically is not called that. So for anybody thinking about that, many people still think it's ASR, and you're probably good enough just still calling that. You don't have to change it to MAR because a lot of people don't know what MAR is, and it's not worth explaining. And here's the injection wells. We had injection wells for a few years. Back in 1985 when we started this process, we had injection wells. The only people that liked injection wells was the driller and the pump contractor because they kept fouling up, and we'd hire the pump contractor to go out there and flush the well again. So then about in year 2000, we had a study with the American Water Works Association, and strangely enough, we were studying the concept of, can you just put water in at the surface? We did our superficial studies of the ground, and we found that there's lots of caliche. Let's strip off this caliche like concrete, strip it off. What happens with water? Well, it moves down very quickly. We even put in little piezometers along the way to intercept or to study where the water's going, and we understand where it's going, and it's going to the aquifer. And it's much less expensive. In that study, we said that the basins cost about $75,000 to excavate a basin. A well would cost on the order of $400,000 to $500,000. And if you don't need a well, again, Neil will tell us all the reasons why you would need a well. But geologically, if you don't need one and you have the land available, a basin may be a favorable choice. But I think it goes into what Mike says. You need the hydrogeologists out there helping you understand what your conditions are so you make a good decision. And here I just showed the power plant location and the golf course. Again, beneficial use. And those are the existing spreading basins. These spreading basins are about 150 foot squares. We are in the process of building something very exciting to us. So we have, in this picture, we're showing 4 basins. Again, they're 150 foot squares. They're not very attractive. Our president doesn't think they look very good. And they're not very good looking, but we're working on it. So we're going to build, I'll get to that in a minute. So the recharge basins, as compared to wells in our example, they're cost effective. They require more land. However, if you start thinking about injection wells, I've been converted on this thinking. You used to think an injection well is just a spot on a map and that's all the land that it needs. But if you're going to service this injection well, you have to have space around the well so you can get your pump pulling rig to install a pump, and I think a lot of people forget that. So you have to think about that if you're designing an injection well. Reserve that land so that you can come service your well. So here's a pie diagram that kind of shows the beneficial use of our Fred Hervey effluent that is treated to drinking water quality, and we've been doing this since 1985. There's El Paso Electric. We have basins. I'm trying to do this without my glasses. And injection wells. The injection wells, we have one left, and when it ultimately collapses, we're not going to replace it because we have our capacity in the basins. And then the Painted Dunes Golf Course. And so as we go into the future, we're working on something called the Enhanced Arroyo. The Enhanced Arroyo is something that is aesthetically pleasing. It's going to have hiking and biking trail around it. It's about a 2-mile long basin, kind of runs like this, going from east to west. It's going to connect this Fred Hervey effluent to it. It does have some of these, you mentioned little dams and things to kind of build up the head, let it sink down. An aesthetic value to it. Some native vegetation will be introduced around it. And then we're also building a pipeline from our existing system. So whenever we have a full river supply and excess system water, we can actually beneficially recharge our aquifer with more water. We're providing provisions for that. So we think that that's very helpful for the long-term future of our aquifer. So this is kind of that concept here, that we have water rights for 70,000 acre-feet, and if the water is flowing in the river, we only use 60,000 of it. So there's 10,000 acre-feet of excess river water rights that we would treat at our river plant. That's in the next picture here. The Jonathan Rogers is our river plant. We put that water into our system, and then we're going to build a 6-mile pipe that connects the extent of our system up to the enhanced arroyo. And here's the description of the enhanced arroyo. It's a long, skinny basin, and it'll provide up to 17,000 acre-feet, depending on the amount of water in the river system. But that'll be the core. The key is if the river's flowing, but we're going to be able to capture and beneficially recharge our aquifer. So here's an artist rendering of what the enhanced arroyo looks like. It's going to be a welcomed addition to our northeast. Again, some hiking trails around it. It's going to have a park element. We're going to have signage that kind of describes the process to our public. We really believe in educating our public about what we're doing at El Paso Water. I think that helps with everything you do, is if you educate your public why you're doing this. Then we'll also explain the beautiful geology of the Franklin Mountains behind it. So this is what our system looks like right now. Those are the basins. They're not quite attractive, so we're going to make them look better. So let me shift over a little bit to the final segment, and that is the advanced water purification. Again, we've rebranded it, and that's our pure water system. This is water that's been highly treated already to meet irrigation standards. Here's what it looks like. Water that's been highly treated, meets irrigation standards. It's already being used for pecan irrigation, river discharges, even golf course irrigation. And we're going to run it through 5 more levels of treatment: membrane filtration, reverse osmosis, advanced oxidation, GAC, and chlorine disinfection. So think of a belt, suspenders, and another belt, and another suspenders. But it is a process that we're going through with the state. They have approved it, and we've actually started the construction of it, and it's a very much needed supply for El Paso. It's a new source of water for us. We're going to continue using our aquifers, but we can't use our aquifers to meet future growth. We need new supplies, and this very much meets that definition of a new supply for us. And I think that wraps it up. Thank you.
Do you have any questions for Scott?
On the managed recharge, so you go straight from the wastewater treatment to drinking water standard and then to your infiltration pond. That drinking water standard, does that take out the PFAS or PFAS or forever chemicals before it goes to that pond? And just curious on that.
Right. I don't know how to answer that other than if PFAS were found in the stream and regulated, we'd have to comply with the regulations in place. But we're basically dealing with a wastewater discharge permit that's over 40 years old. So PFAS back in that day was not even contemplated. So, and we just got a new permit issued, and I don't think the permit says anything about PFAS in it. So that's how I'd answer that one. All right.
You have another question?
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask one?
Yeah, sure.
Can you describe in 1 minute your operations and maintenance plan for your basins themselves?
Oh, very good question. So we have, let me see if I can go to this picture right there. Okay, this picture will say what 1,000 words can say. The basin on the left is clear and it looks like dirt. The other one on the right, where they're running water in it, it's getting mossy. And that, when it gets mossy, it means water is building up. It means that the infiltration rate is getting slower and slower, and it means that the operator needs to quit using that basin and come over to this one that he's already cleaned out. Also, I would say that the basin on the far right is also cleaned and ready to take water. So, but when the basins start to build water, these are not built to be ponds. They're built to dispose and recharge. And when you see ponding, that's an indication that it's slowing down. You're getting more evaporation, and you get biologic activity like a moss, and you also get a fine sediment with our West Texas winds blowing dirt in. So the maintenance, we build these ramps that allow you to get down to the bottom of it, and they drive down, and all they got to do is scrape off a little bit of that dirt, push it off to the side, and that's kind of the maintenance. And on some of these basins, you can kind of see a steep slope. That's an indication that they had to cut through some caliche. It's like a cliff former for those geologists out there. You have slope on a soft, but if it's hard material, it's a cliff former, and that's a good indication of stripping through the caliche, which makes it a premier recharge site for us.
Very good.
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
All right.